Good evening, and welcome. We're back again. I'm Dr. Renee, and tonight we have a very hot topic. You guys, you let me know what you want to talk about, and I listened. You guys wanted to talk about going back to school during COVID-19, during a pandemic. So we have not only a pediatrician, we have a child psychiatrist, because let's face it, physical, mental health are both very important. And we also have one mom who is a homeschooling expert. And then we have another mom who does not want to become a homeschooling expert. So it's going to be a great discussion. I hope you guys will please share this with your people. I'm going to post, as I always do. Please like and start a watch party. You know, we at blackdoctor.org, we love the viewers. So please, 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 put your comments in there, because I'm going to try and read as many as I can and address whatever questions you have. Because like I said, we have three physicians, myself and two others, but two children experts, mental and physical health. And then we also have two moms, and actually one of the doctors, the pediatrician, is also a mom too. So you guys have seen all of these people before, except for one of us, but I am so excited. I hope that you all will please, please make sure that you start the watch parties, share this with your family and friends, because who else should you listen to but, of course, your people? So let's get it started, okay? So here we go. Good evening, ladies.
Hello. Good evening.
So let me pull this off so they can see your name. So we have Dr. Ericka Goodwin, who has been here before. She's a child psychiatrist, and she's all things Ericka. She'll tell you at the end. She'll tell us about her fabulous page, because she's launched that since she was last on. So, and then Dominique Jordan Turner, fabulous Chicagoan. I'm sure everyone already knows who she is, but she is the executive director of Chicago Scholars, an amazing program. If you don't know about it, you need to get to know about it if you have high school students. And Dominique is a mom, and she's going to talk about her child and her experience. And then Eva Wilson, who is SocaMom, who's been here before. Eva has three fabulous children, and Eva actually homeschooled her children prior to this school year. And I'm talking about this past school year that just went past. So she kind of knows a little bit about homeschooling already. So, and she actually is a homeschool expert. A lot of people come to her to find out how to do it best. And then, of course, Dr. Fran Pierce, who's been here before. Dr. Fran is an amazing pediatrician in the south suburbs of Chicago. And you guys know she's been here before. And actually, some of our guests don't know, Dr. Fran is a COVID survivor. And she spoke about that with us before. So let's get started, you guys. Like I said, please post your questions, comments, and I will do my best to see what I can see. And let's get ready. So first things first, I want Dr. Fran to please, because I saw all sorts of interesting comments before this started this evening from grandmothers, parents. Can you please explain, because I'm sure you've seen the numbers, Dr. Fran. You obviously have patients as well. The numbers are really going crazy for the schools that have already opened in Ericka's lovely state of Georgia. I'm sure everyone's seen on the news that they opened and things went real crazy in 1 week.
Right, absolutely. So we have our own study going right now, in that we see that schools that opened at the end of July and early August already are showing signs that the rates of COVID are going up. So there's no denying that putting children in classroom settings and interacting is putting them at greater risk. We do know that COVID has children get less sick with the COVID virus and less risk of hospitalization and death, but that doesn't mean that it's zero. And what we keep encouraging parents about this whole wanting to go back is, we have no idea the impact of asthma, flu, all of these things on how COVID will affect children. And when COVID first came around and started increasing in numbers, we didn't see a lot in children because we immediately closed schools. So now that we are opening them and creating this environment where just viruses and bacteria get spread very easily, it's a whole new world, and we don't know truly the full impact that COVID will have on our children. So we can't just learn by accident that this can be devastating to our children. We really have to roll this out very slowly. The AAP even recognize that when they first said, yes, of course, for many reasons, we need to get kids back into school, they did that with very specific conditions. And unfortunately, those conditions aren't, being met because we haven't seen the disease rate go or the infection rate go down. We're certainly not in a period where we're less than 3 to 5% of the population having it. So things are there's just too many unknowns at this moment for us to really take that risk of just just becoming free and opening schools and putting our children at risk.
So here in Chicago, we know that they decided that they're going to go virtual. Chicago public schools.
Right.
So that's not the South suburbs. That's not charter schools. That's not private schools, but the Chicago public schools. So my thought is that even if we just do it just a little, if we just can get one semester, I think. I don't know if Dr. Fran, do you agree that probably after the new year we might be okay and we could go back to school?
Potentially. I mean, What we need is more information. So by allowing kids to, at this point, just go remotely, then we'll be able to kind of see how the asthma flare that always happens every year, as well as flu, will affect COVID. Because at this point in time, we came into the whole coronavirus when we were entering the spring and our flu rates and everything were going down. Now that those rates are going up, who's to say that we're not going to see kids getting much more ill? We know that children with asthma are at greater risk for contracting the COVID and having complications by it. So when we enter into this season where asthma is at its greatest height and children are getting just naturally sick from their asthma symptoms, adding COVID to that is going to create just a lot of confusion and chaos. And if we're to have kids to go back and the first kid who coughs or sneezes, whether it be due to COVID or asthma, there's going to be no way to differentiate that. So we really have to just take this very slowly and very safely and just see how all these different viruses will impact COVID on our children.
So Dr. Ericka, I ask you, what do you think the implications will be on the poor children that unfortunately only children that, unfortunately are being abused at home? What do you think is going to happen to those children if they do have to work, go to school remotely for the next semester?
Well, that's been one of the biggest concerns pretty much the whole time when school switched from being in school in person to virtual, was that one of the main places that people identify abuse in children is in the school setting, so that the entry into child protective services or people being able to see what's going on is much more limited when children aren't in school. So I think we all believe there will be a continued impact for children that are in unsafe homes due to the fact that it's harder for other people from the outside to identify what's going on in the home. And it's going to take a lot of creative solutions for people to find new ways to potentially pick up on these children and intervene, given that they're no longer in the school system. So I believe that's a challenge that we will all have to continue to work to try to find some solution that keeps our children safe.
So Dominique, I am so excited to talk to you because I read you posted online, and that's when I was like, oh, this is a very interesting way of thinking. So please express your thoughts on especially Chicago public schools going back to school.
So here's the thing. First of all, thank you for having me. I first want to start out by saying that this is such a personal choice. And every parent has to do what is best for them and their child. I want to just honor and respect that some kids have asthma or pre-existing conditions. And if that were my child, I would probably choose something different. I am choosing for my child to go back based on who she is and where she's going. And, what's interesting is on social media, people attack you for your decisions, but this is not a one size fits all. You have to ask yourself, what is your health condition of your child in the family in which they live? What are the school environment and where they're going and what precautions they're taking? And so I feel really comfortable where she's going. She doesn't attend attend CPS. If she were going to CPS, I probably would have a different response, but her school is a private school with a class size of no more than 14. And they are looking at it in a cohort style. They're taking advantage of indoor and outdoor space. They are not doing any cross cohort kind of mixing. And the way that they're going to handle it, and I'm leaving out a lot of details, but the way that they will handle it is that if someone is infected within that whole cohort goes out for 2 weeks to quarantine as opposed to the full school. And so they have a massive campus for people to really spread out and practice social distancing. And because of the precautions that they're making, and because of my child's current health condition and the ways that I know that we manage here at home, I feel comfortable, but I certainly respect the decisions that many others have to make for them and their families.
Right. One of the things that I think we're seeing with the schools that have gone back, and I totally agree that it is very individualized as far as the decision you make and the comfort level you will have. But the logistics of it become quite complex because in that cohort of children, even if they do it by cohorts, once a child comes in coughing and sneezing and is kept home, you find that these symptoms are going to be impacting the whole cohorts so frequently that so many people are going to be quarantined that dynamic gets very difficult to navigate, because one child in that cohort tests positive, then that whole cohort is out. We know that there's going to be spread. We know that a lot of children will test positive despite not having much symptoms. So then we're going to have a lot of teachers and children being put on these 14-day quarantines, which is also going to play a role and impact how much learning can actually go on if we keep having to have kids sit out, teachers sit out for these 14-day periods. So it's a very complex dynamic that from both sides, from wanting to, and we know all the benefits beyond just academics that children gain from going to school. I mean, children are getting school lunches. They're getting resources such as physical therapy, occupational therapy, and these impact children tremendously. And without them, many of these children are going to struggle. But on the flip side of that, we have so many challenges trying to keep everybody in school safely, and with children being put on quarantine for 14 days in and out because someone has asthma-like symptoms or even COVID-like symptoms that have to wait to get tested and have to sit out until they formally get a negative, make it all so crazy, honestly.
You know, one of the things that I think through, it's this balance of mental health and physical health. And so I appreciate the folks who are here. And so in my mind, I have to figure out which is the greater risk, right? And based on the data that I'm seeing, I'm not seeing a huge physical risk. I do recognize that there's a lot that we don't know, but I have seen firsthand the mental health risk that exists. Now, I have a very active and engaged young person who loves school, and I have seen her wane in terms of her interest in school. I've seen her wane in terms of her connection to people, and I don't want that little light to dim because of this year. And I think that we don't think about the mental health aspects as much as we do the physical. Clearly, you can't even focus on mental if you are not here present wise. And I get that. But I will tell you, and this is my own lived experience, I've had cousins, 2 best friends, an assistant, lots of people in my family who have tested positive for COVID, and they're fine. And so the question that I ask, and maybe this is a question for you all to share, I ask people, are people dying with COVID or from COVID? And that is my question. I think that there is so much narrative in the media around people dying from COVID. And I challenge the numbers. I challenge the data. I know that there's lots of cases, but when I look at the death rate, I look at the long-term effects of the people, the dozen people in my community, I feel like the mental health risk is far greater than the physical health risk.
So Eva, you haven't spoken yet. So please share with us your experience, because your children obviously have been sitting inside the entire summer. and their only second summer in Chicago. But
Yes.
I mean, but what I've said is there's nothing going on. So what are we missing? There's nothing happening. But I know that they were eager to be in school this past school year, and I know they're eager to be in school this year. So what are your thoughts? And I know that you have some plans and ideas of how you're going to do things because you guys have gone virtual.
Yes. So, hi, everybody. Thank you for having me, Renee. It's always a pleasure to talk to you, and everybody else. Hello. So my kids homeschool. They were in brick and mortar school. The two that are home with me now, I have a 21-year-old, but the 14 and 15-year-old were in brick and mortar school for kindergarten and first grade. So after that, they didn't know school in a, traditional setting until 8th and 9th grade. And they were very excited to get there. Okay. I know people have this picture of homeschool children as these kind of withdrawn. They're not, how are they going to socialize? That's the biggest question that people ask. And I'm like, ask the mileage on my car. There will be socializing, trust me on that. But what we're doing now is not homeschooling. Even if you are a homeschooling parent, this is not homeschooling. This is like a crisis type of thing, right? And so if I was just going to bring my kids home in a normal environment and say, all right, we're going to homeschool now, it's not as traumatic as it is in this situation because they can't see their friends physically on like every single day. So I have extroverted kids. They're very, very active. My youngest is a gymnast, and her gym is just now opening, but they have the same thing. If you go on vacation during the summer for 14 days, you can't come back to the gym. So it's not just because you let the kids go, it's not what they're used to. So that's one thing. Two, my kids are very, very aware of what's going on. And my son got a sore throat. Okay. Hadn't left the house for 3 weeks. All right. Hadn't been anywhere. I think we went out to play tennis once, but hadn't been anywhere. He got a sore throat. And he's usually very kind of casual, kind of nonchalant, kind of, oh, I'm sick. That means I get ice cream. To him, that's not what this meant. This meant, oh, dear God, I'm going to kill my asthmatic mother. That's where his brain went immediately, right? So the mental health concerns I have as far as them going back to school too early is worrying about their friends, worrying about their teachers, worrying about what they might be bringing back to their families, right? And then, I remember when I was in high school, you would have the one kid from one school, not even your school, that, everybody gets their license at 16 and they would get in a car accident and pass away. Then the whole town knew. And then there were memorials, and then there was, vigils, and then there was, but when you have kids in school and we don't know what could happen, we're still in a very, still trying to gather the information stage on how it affects children. But you're going to start to have memorials for teachers, bus drivers. And that, to me, is worth staying home for 6 months so that you don't have your child's yearbook full of memorials. And that is their experience from kindergarten through 12th grade.
Yeah, that's true.
I feel, and I totally want to show support because of the mental health aspects and my desire for my own children to go back. And I totally see and want the value for my kids for the experience of prom and senior events and all of that. I totally am not minimizing that. But when you think of even one child dying of COVID, that's one child too many. And we look at the statistics of the number of children going back to school. And if we took 5% of that would just test positive, that would be over 1 million children. And if we took 0.2% of that is projected to get sick enough to die, that may be close to over 14,000 children. So I guess the question is, who really wants to put their child at that risk? Because there's nothing that I as a physician can tell you that would say, that just because your child has no underlying illness, that they could not fall ill to COVID. So the risk to me is too great. Even myself, who I have no underlying illness or anything, and the degree of how sick I got with COVID in being a totally healthy person, that's where I become very uncomfortable to say that despite my kids having no illness or anything else, that I can really feel comfortable putting them in that setting, that there are so many unknowns. And there is a lot of research out there that does support that children, don't get very sick from the COVID virus, nor are they the true transmitters of the virus. So that would say, oh yes, then we should be able to go back. What we don't know is how that impacts when you have these asthma symptoms, you have the close proximity and the number of children with it. Does that change it? Does it change it in flu season? So I just feel we need more time, more data, so that we can reassure parents that if you're going back, that we can say that you can safely do that, regardless of your child's underlying health conditions or not.
So one of the things I would insert is perhaps the obvious, but we are living, all of us are a bit privileged, and we live in a bubble, and we have the ability and the privilege to make a decision to stay home with our kids, to have a pandemic pod, if you will, and to and share, kind of group share or homeschool. And I think when I take off that hat, and I do have that privilege, I recognize it, even though I'm a single mom, I have a very active ex-husband where we could figure it out if we wanted to. As the CEO of Chicago Scholars as well, I work with first generation low income students, and many of them I checked in with weekly during this pandemic. And I will tell you that most of their parents don't have that flexibility or that privilege. Right. And so you also have, I think you're going to see a talent drain, an opportunity drain on these dynamic and amazing young people who cannot focus. I had at least 3 students who had to share a computer, share internet, who really couldn't do any online learning because she's the oldest and she's taking care of her 2 little brothers and sisters. There were some young people who they didn't even have a quiet space in the house to take our Zoom calls, and some of them were in the bathtub in their homes. And so I do just want to acknowledge the privilege. And as I think about the broader community, especially low-income families of color, the impact that will have when these young people are raising themselves.
Right.
And I think that, I don't think that it's the responsibility of schools and teachers to raise our kids, but it is a part of it. And in an uncoordinated fashion, if employers are not making concessions, how do we reconcile that for a bunch of young people who will be raising themselves and will fall through the cracks?
Well, this is where our government needs to really be providing that support. That's why that call to Congress was so important, that they impress upon employers to make available ways that parents can stay at home. And for those who have lost their jobs, providing resources, financial resources, where parents are able to afford food and activities and services for their children in this time where they may be unemployed. So that's really where we have to call to our government to not say that they won't fund schools because if they choose not to open, but provide resources so that if the schools cannot open, then families that have less resources available to them can get them. They still should be able to get link cards to provide breakfasts and lunches for children that would normally get them at school. That's where those financial resources should go, so that for children, imagine being home with autistic children or an autistic child and having to figure out how we get, physical therapy, occupational therapy. This is where those resources should be funded and available to families.
Now go ahead.
It kind of seems like a catch-22, right? When you think about children who don't have the resources. 9 times out of 10, if they don't have those resources, the school is not going through the rigorous guidelines that they've put up with the number of children in the classrooms, with, the cleaning. I mean, I heard already some schools are asking parents to provide more cleaning supplies than they did before, which, I mean, this was my first year in Chicago public school with any public school system. And we provided paper towels. The kids got extra credit for providing wipes, and those are now things that you can't even get. And if you can get them, they're terribly expensive. So if you still have a classroom of 30 children and you still have the parents that need to go out to work, and there are so many different ways to be exposed. I mean, we're now reading about Black and brown children who are losing both parents. So there's got to be some kind of coordinated effort to give the same safety precautions to the low income families who may be in a school system that doesn't have a lot of money, to give them the same protections that you would get at a private school where you can put 15 kids in a class and you could have pods and you can have outdoor learning. I have a friend who's in administration, and I was like, oh my gosh, having the kids learn outdoors would be fantastic. And she's like, some of these kids are targets. You can't have them outside because the people who are not in school are aiming at them with weapons. So school is their safe place for more than just food, more than just education. You've got just random school shootings that happen inside the school. So imagine if you have large groups outside. So there's a lot of considerations that are going to require money. They're going to require care for the children, and they're going to require input from parents who literally don't have time to answer a survey.
So the question that I have there, somebody actually asked it. So it says, stay home until it goes away for good. And the question that I would ask this group is, when does it go away, right? Because if you ask the same community of Black people, right, if they're getting the vaccination when it comes out, most of us are going to say no, right? So at what point is enough, right? And so for me, I believe that how you start is indicative of how you will finish. And I think the reason why last year worked okay was because they got a chance to understand the norms, the rules. The teachers understood their personalities, their learning styles, learning differences. And we were able to finish the year out pretty successfully because there was a routine in place. What I fear is for those going into kinder, going into 7th grade like my daughter, going into high school for the first time, to understand what does it mean to switch classes? What does it mean, in terms of just the rituals and routines of school. And I think that we're going to see very different outcomes to start a year like this as opposed to finishing a year like this. And so I am fully prepared that my daughter is going to be sent home to quarantine because of all the reasons you mentioned, Dr. Fran, right? Right, all of those things. I fully am prepared for that. But what I do want is for her to get off on a good start, just like riding that bike. And once you get rolling, like, okay, come on, take it from there. But I do need you to get some foundational things in place with all the precautions that the school is taking, the precautions that we're taking at home. And so I think how you start is really important. And I do think that mix of in-person and virtual could work.
Well, I think you brought up a good point, which is this entire issue has been surrounded around uncertainty. No one's certain when it's going to end. People aren't always certain about what's going on. And then there's this contextual issue of how to manage as adults in the situation, our own uncertainty, and how to support children and young people's uncertainty around the situation. Because the honest answer to half these questions is we don't know. We don't know when there will be a safe vaccine. We don't know when the numbers will go down a lot. We don't know when it will be safe to hang out and to socialize in the way that we did before. Nobody knows.
Right.
And finding ways of managing, and I think some of it actually starts as adults of finding ways to manage our own anxiety around the situation so that we don't transfer additional anxiety to the children. Because if you look at a lot of times what a lot of us are seeing practically is the symptom that's popping up a lot is a lot of anxiety, even in children that weren't previously particularly anxious, because there's so many changes in routines. There are changes of what's going on within the household, what their social interactions are. There are some children that will, just like there are adults that find it easy to adjust to socializing and connecting virtually versus in person. Children have similar personalities that some will adapt readily to things being virtual and hanging out with their friends on Zoom or talking to them over their video games. versus some that just have a harder time transitioning. And there are a lot of mental health issues threaded through there, because someone also mentioned kids with special needs. And some of the schools haven't quite problem solved how to provide the assistant for special needs children when they're home. So it's like a hugely multi-layered situation that I wish there was a single answer to. Right. And honestly, is not. But if I had to say one thing that's very important is, as parents, you're going to be one of the people that know your children the best, and being able to identify when your child just feels a little off, or just kind of out of sync, out of touch, kind of just different. Because if we went through all the symptoms of everything mental health, the key word that's in all of it are impairment and change. It's change of sleep, change of appetite, change of personality, irritability, all this stuff. And being able to see if your child appears to be shifting, to be able to come in and have a conversation with them before it's a crisis. Because that's the main issue, is some people will need support. And it doesn't mean someone even has a major mental health diagnosis or issue, but sometimes people and children will need some additional support, and being able to start looking for that support before you're in a crisis.
Mm-hmm. I couldn't agree more with you, Dr. Ericka. It is one of those things, and I feel confident in this because I know my child, and we make this decision together. I would never put her in a situation that she's uncomfortable with. So we made it as a family. I asked her, I said, Kennedy, what do you think? She says, Mom, I think it's the right idea that most kids stay home. I need to be, I'm better in a classroom. So that's my choice. I check it every day. We do rose and thorn. What was your rose? What was your thorn? So I know when something is off with her, depending on what her response is, rose being the best part of the day, thorn being the worst part of the day. And so if something looks off, we will absolutely will change. What I believe wholeheartedly, and what I was disappointed in with Chicago public schools, is that they eliminated the opportunity for choice. Right. And so there was a hybrid model, and parents could choose. A lot of parents chose to do fully remote. But some parents did choose to do hybrid, which would have been, I think, 2 days out of the week where they actually went into the school building. And so because families are so different, because the needs of our students are so different, I do just believe in giving choice. We make choices every day. I am also that person. I've never gotten a flu vaccination, right? I just make that choice. I'm that same person that declines the insurance on my rental car. I make that choice. You know what I mean? Right. And so you got to give people choice.
Well, one perspective, though, that I think you have to appreciate is that you are making a decision for yourself and your child. As a physician and as school administrators, we are now broadening that decision base to everyone's child and everyone's, health and well-being. So the perspective is different. And so though my decision as a mother is exactly yours as a mother, my decision as a physician and what I can confidently say to a patient to ensure the best outcome for them is different, because if I can't say with 100% assurity that you will send your child to school and your child will be safe, then I'm not going to offer that advice. And I think that's what CPS started realizing is that when we come into the decision to start giving people choices, then we muddy the waters a lot, because then it just takes that one child to get sick and die from COVID. Then everybody's looking at the school to say, well, why didn't you protect us? So it becomes a slightly different conversation. And as much as we all can sit here and agree, our children will be better off in school, and life, not only mentally, but academically, everything would be better if we could just go back to normal. We have to face the fact that we are in a new normal. Coronavirus is not going anywhere. Next year, this time, we will be talking about coronavirus, but hopefully we'll be talking about it from a viewpoint where either we have therapies that protect us against it, whether that be a vaccine or a medication, but we are entering a new normal. And therefore, if we could just give ourselves a little bit more time to get the most information to do this safely, I don't think we are asking everyone to just commit to the rest of their lives to be living like this. But I think the most prudent thing is to say, let's take a little bit more time, because we are so early in this disease. When we think about how long people with in the influenza of 1918, how long they walked around with masks and how long their lives were different. We're really at the very beginning of this disease. So we just need more information. Hopefully we can get more treatment in place so that when we talk from a mother point of view versus a physician point of view, then our advice can align and say, yeah, let's all get back to school.
I have a question for you all, because this influenced my decision. So my question is about daycares, because daycares have been open for months now, right? And all these babies who were snotting all over everyone, they've gone back. We haven't seen any major spikes in daycares across the country. How do you correlate or not that to public school systems? And what does that tell us about the transmission? What does that tell us about the severity of the virus and the impact with daycares open all over the country?
Well, daycares target a very limited age group. And that age group, their exposure rate is much smaller than what your school age children would be exposed to. So in that regard, you're not necessarily comparing apples to apples. You have a very controlled environment with a limited number of students that it's much easier to, put infants in 6 feet apart, or even create toddlers in more spread out environments. But unfortunately, our school setting is much different. And then those children not only interact with each other on larger numbers, but then they go out and then they do sports. And then they go out and extrapolate to, whether they go to work or other environments. So the volume of people that a 10-year-old may interact with is going to be quite different than, a 2 or 3-year-old.
Thank you.
So.
We can't hear you.
Can't hear you,
We can't
Dr.
hear
Renee.
Renee.
I don't hear Dr. Renee.
How do we lose her? So.
Is she unplugged?
But while we're waiting for her to come back, the only thing I'll add in is that the research does support that transmission to be low in children to adults. So we have to figure out what that other piece is as to why, now that kids have gone back, why the numbers have gone up, if those research is accurate. So there is something missing that we have to figure out.
And the other thing that's been so difficult is a lot of places, there's not really a uniform standard on testing. So I think that's the other piece, is that our data naturally has holes because of the types of samples we've had, unfortunately. And I can speak for Georgia. I mean, at one point you had to literally be 2 steps away from dying, but not quite dead
To get that test, right?
Here. So to me, a lot of the numbers are skewed because there are a lot of people that have had it that didn't have access to a test, or wherever they were being seen was trying to hold on to their test. So they went presumptive positive and didn't actually test them. And then along with the tests that aren't quite as sensitive, that people have had all the symptoms, but they most likely were false negatives, but they didn't necessarily have access to follow up their tests with PCRs. So I think the complicated thing is, the one thing I hear oftentimes is people are like, the media is making more of it, or the doctors are making more of it. And from the honest to God, and I assume Dr. Fran and Dr. Renee would probably agree, is because we have a different communication circle. We hear a lot of things that never seem to make it to the public, as far as there are a lot of hospitals down here on diversion. They don't talk about it, but they're on diversion, which means something in them is full. Their ERs are full, their ICUs are full. And we kind of circle back to what was going on earlier with COVID, where the discussions that part of it also was there's a finite amount of resources. And with the finite amount of resources, we have to be protective of the community, because once your resources hit to a certain point, then folks are going to just die because there's no access. And then at some point, all of your people that are frontline, you're going to lose a critical amount of them, because people are getting sick, and there are people that are frontline and even in support of the medical field and other fields that are considered frontline, that are getting significantly ill or dying or having a level of illness that they can't really work or do things for a month or two or even longer with some of the respiratory sequelae. So it's complicated because you can have people like you that, DJ, that the people you know, everybody was cool. But there are plenty of other people that know a lot of people that had it that either died or they had this 2 or 3 months ago and they still can't go up the stairs or they're having significant pain. So I think that's been the other complicated thing is this. It's almost like something from a sci-fi movie that it just morphs and it changes and there's not one particular understanding and this is how it looks, this is how it's going to be all the time. And I think that's just it's been hard for everybody to hold on to.
What's interesting, I just want to highlight a question from Patricia Wicks here. She says the economy is open. Malls, public parks, entertainment, many people of our ages participating, our jobs, all of those things. But not being in school seems a bit much is what she says. So I know I appreciate that I'm not alone in my stance here with all of you doctors. That is certainly a part of my thinking, right? I see all of my friends, all of y'all on social media have been kicking it all summer, right? We have been parking lot pimping, right, if you will, with our social distancing, right? We have been backyard barbecuing with our masks on. We've had play dates. We've had driveway parties and all of that. Our jobs, restaurants, all of that stuff has been back open. But yet when it comes to our students, which is, and our children and their education, which is, I think, more important than all of that stuff we've been doing all summer, to make that decision. And I just wonder, have we conflated this with our political viewpoint, right? I am no Trump supporter, but I recognize that when he said you must be back in, I think you got people now, who distrust, obviously, this administration, who are going to do just the opposite. And so I try to disaggregate my or politics from what is best by trying to rationally make decisions based on data and fact and what I'm seeing around me. So I just wonder how you all reconcile that as well.
Well, I
don't agree with you either.
Right, as I say, I don't
go anywhere.
I haven't gone anywhere.
I don't go anywhere.
And all my friends that go places, I don't see them.
I haven't seen anyone.
I don't know who's going.
Well,
where,
one of the things that I think,
Dominique, I thought we had same friends, but I haven't gone anywhere.
Yeah.
Most of you know I've talked about a Black doctor. My dad had a stroke in March, so the distance I went was I got in a rental car and drove to Michigan from Chicago, and that was after Mayor Lori Lightfoot, whom I love. Thank you for her. When she opened the lakefront, I felt like, okay, phase 4, we can actually go back outside. And so that is when I finally drove home. Plus, my dad was finally coming home. So since he was coming home, I had promised him at the rehab when we talked to him on FaceTime, I said, I'll meet you there. So I drove home and I've been here. So that's how you see my new setup, because I am in my parents' home in the basement. But so I haven't gone anywhere. I've not seen one single friend since I've been here. I literally sit in his house all day. And guess what? I don't even go to therapy with him because they only let one person in. So my mother drives, so she takes him. So I literally stay home and I Instacart right here at their door. I don't do anything. So, and plus I am an asthmatic too. And so is my mother, besides the fact my dad had a stroke. So we got enough sick people around that I'm not going to add to it. But I had to go to the mall. I went to the mall twice now. I had to go to the Apple store because I have to work. And so, and my charger was about to give out. I had to go. No stores were open. I was grateful for the Apple store being open, but no stores were open. The Apple store took your temperature before you went in. It was 6 foot distancing inside of there. They asked you all the same questions that they asked me when I went to the dentist 2 weeks ago. So I was like, so they're not playing. But when I tell you nothing was open, nothing was open.
That must have been early because I've gone to the mall several times and it is open.
Here in Michigan, they're like, most of the stores are like, now I guess they're like, now we good. Well, and they're not open.
Well, if we can address that, because like when you're saying, going back to school, the reality is we live in a comfort zone that kids have been safe. But if we start seeing those numbers tick up for kids, everyone's attitudes will change. there's almost an expectation when an older person dies, we say, oh, well, they had some underlying conditions and we're sad and, there's concern, but there's not an equal concern that when we start seeing children get sick and children die. And as a pediatrician, I can honestly say that in my practice, no, a lot of kids were not getting very ill. But what the difference is going to be moving forward and why there's so much apprehension to saying, oh, do we really want the schools to open, is because let that one the child die, and then all of a sudden everybody's saying, oh, wait, that could be my child. Because even if we say it's 0.2% of the children that would die, if it's your child, that's 100%. Mm-hmm. And therefore the whole attitude and how we look at this is going to change dramatically when we start seeing the number of children die.
And we haven't talked about the teachers. Honestly, this summer in summer school, there were some teachers that did die because of COVID-19, unfortunately. So we haven't even talked about the teachers who might be parents themselves, and they're exposing themselves to whatever your child came to school with. So I mean, the
healthcare providers,
and the healthcare providers as well. So it's really difficult, but I am very faithful that, and I'm hopeful, and I know that if we can just stay home just a little bit longer,
just to get more answers.
Yes,
so that even if we save one life, we know that we did the right thing and not, when we look at the benefit of what academics they could have gotten in this semester, if they don't get it, they can make it up. Yeah. But if a child dies, we cannot get that back. And as much as we want to move forward for all of the benefits that are so valid, whether it's therapy, whether it's food, whether it's parents being able to go to work, which are all huge things, none of them will outweigh a life. So that's where we just have to just a little pause, a little more information.
A little bit. Data. And I really think that after the new year, we probably will have a treatment and we will have a vaccine shortly thereafter. And I keep talking about this on Black Doctor. We need Black people to please volunteer for the clinical trials for the vaccine. Please. Please. Because we do not want to happen.
Right? The fix is herd immunity. And we got to figure out how we're going to get it. So somebody's going to have to sign up to take
exactly. And what we don't want to happen is that they create a vaccine, and as soon as one of us has to take it, it kills us because we were never tested. So we don't want that to happen. So that's why it's important that we do get vaccinated. We do have one treatment that I know Dr. Fran is aware of. If you have had it and you have antibodies, you need to talk to somebody and let them know so that they can get your antibodies, because you could help someone that has COVID-19 to get better. So that is something that we know does work, and we need to encourage people. They even have TV PSAs about it now, which I think is great, but we need to encourage people to do that. But this is just, it's a crazy situation, and I know I'm not a teacher. So therefore, if I had children, I'd be miserable, but because it's not my ministry. And the children that I've tried to help, God forgive me, but they weren't very happy. So I completely understand, but I do know, I've heard of people, getting together and parents collectively paying a tutor to help because they did not feel comfortable sending their children back to school. Of course, with CPS, because it is virtual, I've heard that they are actually having the classes. The teachers will be online with them for the classes. So it's going to be kind of like just going to school via the computer. But for those that do decide to homeschool because they don't feel comfortable, try to get together as a community and, do what you can to pool your resources, because there are people that were, excellent in math and excellent in science. And that's where the homeschool co-ops came from. So if you can do that, that is amazing. If you're a parent that works and you have a friend, one of your kids' parents that don't work, see if the kids can go over there and you guys can share resources and you can help each other out, because everyone needs to figure out what's going to work best for them. Because I know there's a ton of parents that wish they could stay home and keep their child at home. But because they have to work, they have to send them to school, even if they're not comfortable sending them to school. And I know that Chicago is just one city in the state of Illinois. There are other cities that do not have virtual learning. I just spoke to a young lady today that's in the Lombard School District, and she has a hybrid, so she'll be going every other day to school. So I know that's very popular across the country. They're doing stuff like that. So it's not just this is what's happening here across the country. I know the school district that I came up in here in Michigan, they are going virtual this semester. So the kids will all be at home. But I know it's not going to be easy. And I just wanted to have this discussion so people can understand this is what if you're going to send your child, if you have to send your child to school, and if you choose to send your child to school, just make sure that they're prepared. Make sure they have a mask. Make sure they understand sanitizer and washing your hands. Unfortunately, children aren't the cleanest creatures, in case we didn't know.
Right.
They're gross. They're really gross.
And realize that there are clear guidelines of when it will be safe. We just haven't reached them yet. So we can't really, while the numbers are creeping up, say that we're going to now add yet another component that could potentially spread and make things worse. When we get the virus under control, it'll be much easier to say, well, now we can send them back because at least we have some control over the virus. But we kind of are skyrocketing with our numbers. Then we're sending our kids back, which is, creating more and more havoc from what we haven't controlled yet.
I am really curious what's the pragmatic response here, because I was just like you, Dr. Renee. The first 3 months of this, I did not leave this house. I Instacarted everything. I didn't see friends, didn't see my mother for Mother's Day, all of those things. I'm like, no, Mom, sorry. But as I think I read on social media, it's like we didn't pass the group projects, right? Somebody didn't do what they were supposed to, and we failed, right? And so we have so many people who did what's right. We did. And we have misinformation coming from our government. We have political, agendas that are being shared. And we have people who are just choosing their own selfish needs that have hindered us, flattening that curve. And given all of that, I don't feel optimistic that the human behavior of people is going to change, right? Because past behavior is the best indicator of future behavior. And I think the only thing that will help this is when there is a vaccine, which won't be until early next year, to which I'm not taking it, right? And so nothing is going to change, right? And I'm not letting this little girl sit home for a whole calendar or academic year. And so I have to do what's best within the information that I have. And looking at these behavioral patterns, I'm not optimistic that behavior will change. And so I don't know if there is an optimistic note that y'all want to leave us with.
Well, yes, I have an optimistic note. So this isn't the first time we've seen a pandemic, and we've survived others. We have survived influenza of 1918. We have survived bubonic plague. We have survived polio, measles, all the things we get vaccinated for, we have survived them. In another time where people were very afraid to even come out of the house. And, there were polio hospitals where children wouldn't play freely, and we've survived that. So we are just in it. It's something new to us that we've never seen, but we will get through this and we will get beyond it, and we will all live healthy lives and go back to being in the park and concerts and living life as normal. It's just not today.
Look, and if she can say that after her experience, you'd have to go back and watch the episode, Dominique. But if she can say that after her experience or what she went through, then we're good. Because what she told me is what convinced me to stay my butt inside. I was like, I told my sister, I said, Dr. Fran is healthy as a horse. I said, she looks like she does like Soul Cycle and stuff. I'm not that fit. I said, if it took her out like that, what would it do to little old me? I said, no, ma'am. I'll stay right here. I literally stayed in my house for 14 weeks. I was like, I'm not a big girl. I can't handle it. So, but if she can be that optimistic, I know I can be that. We will. And look, I tell everyone, trust Dr. Fauci. Dr. Fauci said that this is going to pass. I trust him. It's going to pass.
So I would be remiss if I didn't share some of the things that I wish I heard. And on a doctor platform, what I haven't heard people talk about is vitamins, right?
Oh,
Building your
we
immune
talked
system.
about that here too.
Okay. So I've started with, the black seed oil and sea moss and zinc and all of those things that have been, shown to build that immune system, and being proactive with both my daughter and myself. Just trying to take some control over.
Yeah, we've talked about you need to exercise, even though you can't, get to the gym, because most gyms are still not open, and if they are, it's only a few people.
Yeah.
You need to exercise still. I've talked about ways to exercise inside. You can get outside and do something too. We said you need to eat right. Like now, even though stress eating is very big right now, try not to do too much stress eating, because that, what you put in your body really does help your body.
Right.
So you want to make sure that you do keep your immune system, good and healthy. And if you do have any ailments that you do take medication for, now is not the time to skip the medicine. Take your medicine, stay healthy, because you do not want to get sick at all, but you don't want to lower your immune system so that then you would be, a bigger candidate to get COVID-19. So yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead. No.
Dr. Ericka and Dr. Fran, what are the children actually saying about how they feel? Like, because I know we know what our kids are saying. We might know what our friends' kids are saying, but you've got kids coming to you sick. They might have a common cold, but then they're like, oh gosh, I might have COVID. Or, Dr. Ericka, you might have parents sending you their kids who are having a difficult time staying indoors. What else are we missing about what the kids are actually saying and what they need from us?
A lot of the children I'm interacting with if I had to pick what is the biggest thing I'm hearing, it's a lot of anxiety, a lot of nervousness, worry. Some is you can tie to exactly what's going on, and sometimes they end up worried about stuff that has nothing to do with it. They just become these little piles of worry. So you have the children that are really anxious, and then I think the other side are some of the kids that are a little bit dysphoric or irritable because they're just not doing well with being as contained and having different social settings and social outlets, especially, pardon me, dry throat. I promise I COVID tested. I was actually in the hospital. Y'all don't know. You have a whole new perspective when you can't just work from home anymore.
Right.
I was in a state psych facility for 2 months. I was like, I never want to leave my house again, ever. So I COVID tested when I left. But aside from that, is that some children, just as we talked about earlier with adults, is they have a hard time dealing with all of these shifts and changes and not being able to have as much freedom. So naturally, I'm finding that people that live in environments where their kids can get out and do more, even if it's not with other children, that they have large yards or they're in communities where there's a little bit more room where they can safely get out. But it's just kind of the dysphoria of just being separated. And especially with some of these children that for us are made, a lot of identity for adults is work. A lot of identity for school, for kids are going to be school and their peer relationships. And some of them are critical points where they're defining their identity or who they are. And a lot of times that's done within the reference of the collective. So it's finding ways for them to still connect in a way that they feel like is meaningful with the restrictions that we have.
Yeah. I would just add to that is that, mostly anxiety. I would say that my children that are extremely high achieving and are very type A personalities, meaning they, worry about everything, they have to do their best at everything, are struggling a bit more with the online learning. I mean, imagine trying to learn physics online, or, just having to read it yourself and go through it. So there's a lot of reasons for them to be anxious with this type of learning. And also kids feed off of what their parents do. So if you're kind of relaxed and taking it in and saying, okay, this is, what it is for now, we just have to take these precautions and have a very positive attitude, that tends to, create the attitude of the home. But as parents, sometimes we worry about a lot of things, therefore making our kids worry about a lot of things. So I suggest to every family that, you try to create an avenue to have conversations about, yeah, there is something going on. There is something that's impacting our day-to-day life, but here's the way we're going to find some positives in it. We're going to do things together. We're going to take bike rides that we never took before. We're going to, interact with people on a different, we're going to get grandma on video camera and teach her how to use the video camera and talk to her every day. So though it's not our norm, we're creating different norms, and we're creating ways to really expand and teach our children how to deal with adversity. And that's a great life lesson, because at the end of the day, this will not be the only challenge they face. So we have to show them how we're going to tackle this, not only from a financial, but emotional, in all of it, and a social. So.
Anything else, Eva?
Oh, I was just wondering, because, my kids are, I told you my son had to go to the COVID clinic, right? Because now, and it was interesting, what we see online is not necessarily everybody's experience, right? So I didn't know, because he had a sore throat, it was automatic COVID clinic. You don't have an option.
You don't have an option, yeah.
It doesn't matter how long they've been inside. None of that matters, because like Dr. Fran was saying, this is about the collective. This ain't got nothing to do with your personal choices or what waiting room you would rather be in. They do not care. So, my son, of course, like I said, he's very laid back. He went in there with 2 masks on. I'm like, boy, you go pass out. This doesn't make sense. He's like, I need 2 masks. He has a hat on because he don't want to deal with whatever's happening with, it's a lot for kids to think about. And, you may have your own anxieties and your own issues, but especially with teenagers, you don't know what's going on in their brains. You don't know like he's texting with his friends, and we've come up with a way that the kids can kind of be outside, be 6 feet apart, have their masks on, and yell at each other 6 feet away. But right. Even his closest friends are like, no, we're good. We're okay. And their parents are also, no. Right. So I think it really depends. I really wanted to know what other kids are thinking and what they feel about going back to school, because we know what the parents think, we know what the experts think, but how do the kids feel about not going to school? I know mine, again, they were at home for a long time, and they were really, really excited about going back to school. So thank you, Chicago public school system. They end up back home with me for a school strike. I was like, all right, so I'm sorry guys, y'all are gonna be home again. And then when this happened, they're very outgoing kids. They're very, very excited to be out. And for them, it's that they haven't had the school experience. So they're really, really hype about it. But you've got other kids who've been in school their whole lives, and they're like, look, I'm just off the part of it not being a vacation. So now, they had to tell the kids, we started getting emails. Listen, guys, we're going to start counting grades. I was like, oh, y'all weren't counting them before? Wow. Okay. Because, and the kids, they're smart. So they're kind of like, oh, this isn't so bad. I get to stay home. But I'm wondering what they're feeling now that we're 6 months or however many months in. Are they still like, this isn't so bad? Or are they like, oh,
I've seen varied responses. So there are kids who, just like adults, there are kids who are just like, hey, this is great. I don't have to deal with the bullies at school or the attitudes. I can, be in the safety of my home. And then I have the others who are just dying to get around their friends. So it is a mixed bag. But at the end of the day, it is all about, like, the spring was reactive. They just did what they had to do to get these kids through the end of the school year.
Right.
We're being a bit more proactive going forward. So my hope is that, things will be much more organized. It will be more like a school setting, even if they're at home, and children will get a fuller experience with academics. children that are homeschooled, a lot of them do it online. So there is a way to effectively educate children online and just to the masses. So it's just a matter of taking the time to create the right program that I think our teachers and school systems are actively or crazily trying to put together right now. And so people should not be seeing this as doom and gloom, like everything is lost.
Right.
This is a very small subset of time in their whole life. And so, yes, it would be perfect if we could have all those experiences of graduation and prom that we can't get back. But what we are winning on is that there are many children who will stay healthy. There are many families that have come together. There are a lot of positives that have come about through life's changes with COVID. So we have to focus a little bit more on that and not just make it all gloom and doom, and not make it a forever. This is not forever. It is for a short period of time so that we can really get ahead of this disease and then go back to our fulfilled lives of concerts and backyard parties.
And my daughter is still picking out her first day of school outfits. Like, this don't stop no show now. She's like, is the camera on though?
Yeah. My kids needed shopping money for school. I was like, for what? You're not going anywhere.
She's like, no, I got a gift card. I'm gonna make this work. She's still spending her Christmas money on her back to school outfit. She's making it work.
That is so adorable.
That's adorable. So, Dr. Ericka, please tell everyone where they can find you and all your amazingness, because I know you did Dr. Ericka's Groove was this evening as well. So please let everyone know.
I'm just in love that you said I have amazingness. I need to keep you around more often. All right, so you can find me on all social media at Dr. Ericka, DoctorEricka. My parents used all the letters. And I do have an adult telepsychiatry practice. You can find that at askdrgoodwin.com. That's AskDrgoodwin.com. And I'm just honored to be here, and I'm just honored to be able to live my purpose and help people get the life that they deserve. So I'm very passionate about mental health, but I'm also very thankful and grateful that Dr. Renee invited me to come on this platform to share with you all and to learn other people's perspectives. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
No problem. So DJT, her and her daughter have been busy. You guys, they wrote a book that came out in the midst of all of this. So you of course, I meant to tell you, I'm glad you have it. Okay, so please tell everyone where they can go get this fabulous book.
So very proud of my 11-year-old. We wrote a book, Little Black Pearls for Little Black Girls, and it is to help you to love the skin that you're in and increase your confidence, but also the relationship between mom and daughter. That was a quarantine read, and then happened to be kind of a Black Lives Matter read. And so we have maximized this quarantine together. You can find that at her website at KennedyJordanTurner.com or on Amazon. I can be found at DominiqueJordanTurner.com and on social media at DJT Speaks.
Thank you, ma'am. And Dr. Fran, please tell everyone where they can find you.
Well, I work for Franciscan Health, and I'm in their Tinley Park office. So if you just Google Dr. Pierce, I will come up in Tinley Park. You can also find me on PediaMom on my Facebook page, as well as my Instagram page. So either one.
Awesome. Yes. And of course, Miss SocaMom.
Okay, so I'm never good at saying all the different places that you can find me. So I'm just going to try. I'm going to do my best. Okay, so my website is SocaMom.com. I blog about Caribbean parenting, and I've been doing that for 9 years now. You can also go to SocaMom Summit. I did a virtual summit twice already during the pandemic. And there's all kinds of things. We have people talking about homeschooling, and Dr. Renee is on there 2 times. So, you can hear about all kinds of cool things at SocaMomSummit.com. Instagram is SocaMom, Twitter, SocaMomDC. And I also have a homeschool group on Facebook. Now, I don't know if there's a censorship or what. It's called Regular Ass Homeschoolers, okay? Because honestly, it's a group called Regular Ass Homeschoolers, and we just talk about making it. Because honestly, I was not set up to be a homeschooler. My daughter went to school at 3. If they would take her, I would send her. Whoever, they just went, right? So it's for people who were not made for this. There are some people who are made for homeschooling, and there's some people who are not. So, you know, we have people who are doing virtual school, people who are doing traditional homeschool, people who are doing pandemic schooling, stuff like that. So that's the other place you can find me if you want to talk about homeschooling or homeschooling during the pandemic. That's everything, isn't it, Renee?
Well, it's just that one thing, but we won't talk about it.
We're not going to. It's coming. Dr. Renee always talking about living the life you deserve. Listen, I'm going to try to live my life and start the podcast. Oh, my gosh.
Okay, thank you.
Dr. Ericka, did she do this to you? Did she? She did.
Dr. Ericka did her stuff. She was on it. Okay.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
What did I do?
You started your page. You get your stuff moving.
Yeah, I got some books, you know, but
Yeah.
you know, I try not to give too much information at one time.
Okay. They'll find it on the site. Thank you, everyone. This has been a great conversation. We've had lots of comments that said that was very informative. So I appreciate you, ladies. It's been a long night. Thank you so much. And everyone, make sure you send and watch the replays. If you're watching the replay, thank you again. We will see you again on Black Doctor very soon. Bye.
Bye.